So why don't we just turn it right over to Stefan, and you can do your presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stefan Esposito from MITx, and how do I advance this? All right, so I'm going to give you a sort of a brief overview of how we've been doing the humanities at MITx. At MITx, we're really interested in finding innovative and fun ways to teach the humanities online, and so I'm just going to give you a smattering of pictures and techniques that we've used. So this is the Ancient Greek Hero with Greg Naj, and here we recruited a team of people who had taken the course before in the brick and mortar environment to serve as teaching fellows online. And it created a really dynamic atmosphere. People loved it. The previous alumni loved it as well. Here we have Justice with Michael Sandel, who's kind of a star. He's very big in Japan, supposedly. But we had interactive polling of like, who would you kill with a trolley under certain scenarios, and then link that to the discussion forum so people could simulate the sort of in-person classroom environment where you're really telling each other what is right and what is wrong. This is Lisa New's Poetry in America course, which is a humongous course, and the most interesting thing she's doing here is interfacing with celebrities. So Bill Clinton is going to read a poem for her and talk about the importance of poetry in America and for American history. We're also using a HarvardX developed annotation tool in this course, which there's a concurrent presentation right now by Leah and Phil about that tool. So if you're way more interested in that than in this course, you should run out now. And then there's ChinaX, which we had a glimpse of in the previous session, and they're doing a lot of stuff with 3D imaging, breaking things into smaller modules, and using GIS mapping. This is Early Christianity, which oddly enough, partnered with Rap Genius to do annotations for the Bible. So now you can get Tupac and St. Paul in the same place. Now we have Tangible Things, which is pioneering the use of documentary style as much as possible. Here we have Shakespeare's World, which is also going to be modular. The professor here is very busy, as many professors are, doesn't want to do a full course, so he's going to do snippets on Hamlet, on Romeo and Juliet, and the most interesting takeaways from those plays. Here we have Visualizing Japan, which is a collaboration between Harvard and MIT to draw upon some of the collections they both enjoy. The history of the book is going to be a modular course, series of courses from HarvardX, and we're bringing together 10 faculty to teach a bunch of different topics, and they will be using some of the neat tools we've developed, including this time map for Letters of Paul, Mirador, which is a document annotation and imaging thing which draws on Harvard's resources, and the annotation tool, which I mentioned before. So humanities and MOOCs, there's a lot going on. There should be a lot more. I'm done. Thank you very much. We can talk later.
Oh, you're going to help. Going to help. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm David Majerich. I'm with the Center for 21st Century Universities at Georgia Institute of Technology. I'm a senior research scientist there, and I'm going to share with you a collaboration between the School of Electrical and Computing and the center where I work. The National Academy for Education Transformation states that there are 5 things that you have to consider when you redesign a course. One is to make the course active. One is to give students sufficient time on task and to monitor that progress. Another is to give the students individual assessment. One is assessment with immediate feedback. And if you're going to overhaul the course, you must consider course drift. Course drift, that is the phenomenon where you have multiple sections of a course taught by multiple instructors, taught multiple ways. And at Georgia Tech, what we did was we wanted to try to minimize course drift in a course entitled Circuits and Electronics, ECE 3710. It started out as a traditional lecture course, and now I'm going to share with you how it was revised, redesigned, and I'll share some results with you as well. So course drift, I told you about that. There were 9 sections of a course taught by 9 different instructors, taught 9 different ways. Course drift, we wanted to deliver the content to the students across all courses the same way. We decided to use a MOOC. The MOOC delivered the content, and we used a blended learning environment where class time, about 10 minutes, students were given a summary of what they saw the night before, and then they moved into problem solving and experimentation. One interesting thing about the course was that hands-on activities were taken into the course, brought into lecture hall similar to this. Some classrooms also. Students got to manipulate the equipment, making abstract concepts concrete. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a hands-on activity is worth 1,000 pictures. How can you get the students to picture and talk about the same things? Just-in-time teaching. Another thing, students come to class with algorithmic problem-solving skills. How do you move away from that? Getting the students to think about design and solving problems. Just-in-time tutoring, that helped. I want to show, oh, and also with the instructors had professional development, and it was sustained throughout the semester. Imagine having a course of perhaps 900, throughout the year, 900 to 1,000 students enrolled in it. And each semester you could have a different set of teachers or instructors for the course. Sustained professional development will help with that. You can talk about best practices, etc. On your right, there is a graph. There was a concept inventory that was administered. You can see from pre to post-test that there were significant gains in 6 of the 9 sections that were taught. You can ask me more questions later about this. My time is up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bernard Cooperman. I teach at the University of Maryland. This is just to prove that I have taught a course, a MOOC. It was very successful. It was a Coursera course. We had about 9,000 or 10,000 people who signed up, at the beginning. Of course, only about 10 or 15% of that finished the course, but we got very good feedback from the people. I want to say that at the beginning because I really want to question the validity of MOOCs. I want to stress to you that MOOCs are a technology. They are a technology-based product. And like all technologies, they will pass, like reel-to-reel tape recorders and the structured learning programs in language that I was taught language with. Those are all now in garbage dumps everywhere, and you can't find those courses anymore. They don't exist. You can see the tape recorder there. I don't know if any of you remember tape recorders, but I do. Not only is it a technology that will pass, it is an expensive technology. It therefore must seek and create, like all technologies, its own justifications. Its viability requires a profitability model, which we call scaling, so that it's worth spending all this money. It creates, moreover, its own presentation possibilities. You can do things on MOOCs you can't do in the classroom, but also limitations. Marketing and research, much of what's gone on here at this conference, and certainly what we all read, emphasizes student learning techniques, how to get students to learn, how to make things go. Very little is talked about with MOOCs with the actual content of the information itself, how it relates to the discipline, and so forth. We stress the short attention span of the students. Coursera tells its instructors to keep the lectures down to 8 minutes by preference. There is a desire for constant feedback to the students, which we call interactivity, but it's basically a way of stimulating them to keep them from falling asleep because we assume that they can't pay attention for longer than just a few minutes. I hope I'm being aggravating enough and silly enough. Now, the question is, does this work for the humanities? The trouble with the humanities, in part, is that the method and the substance of humanities teaching and history teaching and poetry and so forth is highly unstructured and experiential. You don't know a poem in the way you may know a fact of geography or know how to solve a problem. You experience it, and you experience it uniquely. Each person experiences that poem differently, and therefore the kinds of questions you can ask and the grading you could do at the end is much more limited. This problem is part of what is called the crisis of the humanities. Humanists who are all paranoid, I assure you I am part of that group. We blame the younger generation who can't think. We blame the scientists who really run the university. All of that is paranoia. The truth is that the consumption of knowledge in our society has changed fundamentally. Memory has lost its function, and many of the aspects of humanities teaching, I'm out of time, I've just got one more slide. Many of the humanities aspects of teaching have lost their social value, including handwriting. What can we do? I think that MOOCs can continue, and I think they're fine, and I enjoy teaching mine, and I'm teaching it again, and I will do more of them. But I think what MOOCs should do for the humanities is to do what universities can't. In addition to advertising what MIT or Harvard, whatever, have to show on screen, I think what we should be doing is inventing MOOCs that can do what we cannot do in the universities. We can't teach language in the universities. We should use MOOCs to teach language in the same way the Khan Academy does. We should build up a library of publicly accessible resources for students to use outside of the MOOC class. That has not been done as part of the MOOC, despite the rhetoric we've heard here, and that's important. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Dulin and this is Kristen Eshleman. We direct DavidsonX at Davidson College, which is a small liberal arts school in North Carolina. So a key reason that colleges and universities are experimenting with MOOCs today is to explore how these emerging technologies are impacting the core of teaching and learning on campus, both in terms of quality, accessibility, and affordability. This is the motivation behind a qualitative study that we're excited to be running on 2 courses at Davidson College this fall, which specifically looks at how these MOOCs that are being run in conjunction with residential courses are impacting the quality of the student learner experience and of the faculty teaching experience. So the first course that will be a case study is a STEM course that will be taught for the second time. It will be first taught to flip the residential course, and then those residential learners will then serve as TAs during the second half of the course as they continue also with their regular coursework. They'll then be authors of course content, which will become case studies in the last week of that course. The second case study will be on a humanities course, and the basic structure of the residential experience won't change significantly. However, those students will be TAs in the MOOC version of this course that will run in conjunction. And they'll also become curators of cultural artifacts that will be displayed on a collections platform called Omeka.
Okay, so we want to understand really what works in this scenario, and lacking the resources at a small college, we decided to do a design jam. We were inspired by one we attended with George Siemens back in the fall. So you'll see the members up on the board here, and I left out one person, very important person, Daniel Seaton from MIT, who is also participating. That design jam started this summer. It is continuing into this week, where we're doing the tweaking of the final questions for the pre and post surveys and for the interview protocol questions. The study will kick off in 2 weeks. It'll last the course of the semester. It will include typical qualitative methods, observation, focus groups, interviews, surveys, and then we hope to combine it with some of the quantitative data that's coming out of the edX platform. We're using a data scientist who's a Davidson alum to help us generate some weekly and then end of course summary reports so that we can pull together a quantitative and qualitative study. What we're hoping this study will do is address what we think are 3 lacking elements of MOOC research at the moment, qualitative research in general, And we're really inspired by Amy and George in that regard. The work that they're doing is amazing, and I recommend checking it out quickly. In addition, we want to give our students a voice. To me, that's the most important piece of all of this. And we want to see if MOOCs can transform a residential education. So we'll have the results in February. We invite you to take a look at those, and if you want to contact us, our information is on the slide. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as we tackle some of the big questions about MOOCs here at the workshop, often with really big data sets, I want to just take 3 minutes and bring us back to what we might call near-field effects. So these are some of the on-campus, close-range implications for teaching MOOCs. So at Caltech, the desire to stimulate innovation in on-campus teaching and learning actually motivates campus faculty and leaders to be in this world, even more than enhancing the brand or generating revenue or providing broad-based educational resources, although those are absolutely in the mix too. So it's very reasonable to ask, what are MOOCs stimulating on campus? And that is a particularly relevant question, as in the STEM field, we do have this persistent lag between adopting evidence-based practices and knowing what they are. So far, we have 3 broad categories of near-field innovation related to MOOCs: flipped classes, customized learning, and in-the-classroom technology-enhanced learning. And for each, I'd just like to highlight one observation and pose a critical question or problem. First, you're all familiar with flipped classes. Our 6 different MOOC-related flipped classes at Caltech have taken a great variety of approaches. In-class interactions are blossoming, from student team challenges to collaborative problem solving and more. But some of our flipped classes have this gap between actual improved learning and what students perceive they're gaining from the courses. So we have this quandary. Although overall reactions are modestly positive, the classes just don't feel as difficult as expected, despite these gains in learning. Next, the possibility of truly customizing the learning experience through MOOCs is really enticing. We're now seeing MOOC tools being used to introduce small-scale customizations within Caltech classes. For example, offering choices of learning materials for a diversity of student prior knowledge, and developing on-demand MOOCs for working scientists and engineers. As shown in the middle, students seem to appreciate modest customizations, like a mastery approach with multiple problem attempts and feedback. Our question then is, how can we accelerate the availability of more deeply adaptive components in MOOCs? And finally, MOOCs at Caltech are absolutely in dialogue with non-MOOC technologies. The latter, for us, are yielding some compelling insights into real-time student engagement. For example, in an iPad program in the classroom, we've been able to characterize how students engage through time series analyses, both with faculty and with each other. As shown here on the far right, we're better understanding why a few students dominate participation in some cases, as in the upper panel, and how to bolster more students' engagement, as in the slower drop-off in the lower panel. So we ask, can in-class technology-captured participation data like these help inform MOOC teaching, and can next-generation analyses of MOOC data give us some actionable insights for on-campus teaching? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Linda Grisham from Massachusetts Bay Community College.
And Lynn Hunter, also from Mass Bay.
We want to talk about an experiment that was done with the material from edX to see how a computer science class, which is the entry class for non-computer science students at MIT, how would that material be useful or be absorbed at a community college? As was mentioned earlier today, yes, we have a lot of students, when they come in, they're really not prepared math-wise, et cetera. We do a lot of work with them. So these are students in our school who are computer science students, but they have very limited programming experience and stuff. So what was done, how can I get this? to move over. Thanks. Sorry about that. What was done was that the material from, is still not. Yeah. So what was done was the instructor, who was Hal Riggs, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, what he did, he looked at the edX material, and it's very concentrated, very high quality, but he sort of realized that it really needed translation. And so what he did was to provide context, provide vocabulary, provide practice problems so that students could do this. The way he did this was to create a set of interactive tutorials. And so every week, students would go through that, and having gone through that, they were able to do the material from edX, do the problems, do the assignments, take the exam. We started with 18 students. 2 dropped out immediately, but all 16 actually completed the edX course with the materials in the same time frame as the regular course was there. The elements for success were these tutorials, because he really understood what these students actually needed. And as time went on, students met. This was a hybrid course. They met for an hour and a half, but as time went on, they would work at home, and they would come in and work in groups and sort of peer-to-peer tutoring themselves.
When we met with the edX group initially, and Anant was there and asked us, he said, so what do you see as the benefit of the materials? And as a college administrator, former instructional designer, I piped right up and I said, well, this is high quality content. And as we all know, there are administrative and pedagogical concerns or issues with any sort of teaching experiment, and i.e. agendas. As an administrator, I'm looking at cost versus benefit and those kinds of things as well. Linda, instructional design components. So, but high quality content, we talk about that a lot. What does that mean? And you can sort of tease it apart in a lot of different ways, but one way that we were looking at it was the edX video lectures are very high, have very high production values to them. It's very hard for a community college like us to produce quality videos like that. We just don't have the resources to do those sorts of things. The quizzes that were, oops, wow, we're over. So the other key ingredient I'll just mention is what I would call locally driven, learner-centered, pedagogically focused, activity-based learning resources, and that's what Linda just mentioned Hal created. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let's go forward with this, right? Oh, hi, so I'm Daniel Seaton from MIT, but soon to be at Davidson, as Kristen said. So today I'm going to be talking about teacher enrollment and MITx MOOCs, and hopefully a little bit of dialogue about what this means for course designers and platform providers, or designers. So why teachers? As being part of this movement from the very beginning with 602X, there's been tremendous, there have been a number of experiments that showed teacher enrollment, whether it was a teacher helping curate content in one of the introductory physics courses, whether it was a teacher in Mongolia flipping his classroom based on the 602X content. There have been a number of situations that sort of make you realize, oh, teachers are equally interested in this material as well. And so we might think about, well, what it would mean if large numbers of teachers were present in these courses. For example, we might be able to do some sort of expert-novice pairing in discussion forums. We might be able to network educators. Many complaints, and we've seen it in some of these talks today, are that a lot of teachers in departments don't necessarily share material. So these could be places where they could do that. There's also a potential for teacher professional development, right? If teachers are already taking courses, why not find accreditation models for them so that they can actually leverage that in their own professional development. And then, as I said, I think there's really, if there are teachers there, you could really consider reshaping current courses and infrastructure. But it all comes around to a central question: are a significant number of teachers enrolling? So we surveyed all of the MITx courses from this spring 2014. We have about 31,000 responses, which is only about a 16.8% response rate, but the results are striking. About 28% of people across courses identify as or having been teachers, right? So that's 1 in 4. That's just remarkable to think about. Now, in terms of current teachers, it's about 1 in 10, so 8.7%. And then in terms of people who have actually taught the topic, and I'm just focusing on these bullet points below, it's about 6%. So you can argue that 1 in 20 people in these courses have actually taught the material, right? And that's rather startling when you think about how we're designing these courses. Now, these numbers, I won't explain the courses because of time, but it's important to sort of also frame this around their participation. So are they actively pursuing their profession? Are they commenting in discussion forums? It's about the only place you could do that. And a comment in this case is actually a reply to a post, right? So if we take that as a proxy for instruction, we can ask, well, how many people of these populations of surveyed participants are actually commenting? So here, this is just a pie chart showing that surveyed teachers are 3% of the total population. 8% are surveyed non-teachers, and the rest is about 89%. So you see the differences in populations, but when you look at how much commenting is going on, 22%, is it 21 or 22? 21. 21% are from surveyed teachers, and about 33% are surveyed non-teachers, and the rest come from other people. And that's just remarkable, right? So they're actually, teachers are there, and they're participating in these courses. And so when you really frame it in a different way, you can begin to say that for across courses, 1 in 12 comments is from a current teacher. And 1 in 16 is from someone who has taught or has experience with the topic. And it's just absolutely remarkable, in my opinion. You could even begin to have playful anecdotes about student-teacher ratios. I think 1 in 16 is what it is typically for a high school in the US. And so in these MOOCs, we have something similar. And so just to talk a little bit about maybe the future, there's many questions remaining. This is it's a first survey that we've done. But I really think that this has a number of implications. One is reframing how we treat demographics, right? There's the Penn reports, the Harvard and MITx reports talking about age and level of education. This would certainly change our perspective there. It's also, I think, and just to sort of follow up and not read every bullet point, there's also some idea of how do we really optimize sort of crowdsourcing of teacher involvement, and even how do we optimize their experience through accreditation models. Thank you.
So if all the panelists could come back up and join us in the front. And our colleague up there, Kanan, okay, has a mic, and he's actually going to be looking for you. So if you could hold up your hands if you have questions. And I want to start with one, actually. So here's the mic, and whoever wants to go first. I'm going to start with this issue around transparency of teaching, which I think is actually came right out of Daniel's. I mean, teachers are interested in knowing what other teachers are doing. So how do you think that's actually going to translate into better learning? Anyone want to go for that? It's going all the way down to the end.
It's a great question, and in my opinion, there's still a lot of work to do by both content teams and course providers. There have to be tools in order to allow this group of people to really impact the courses and then impact learning. So there's actually, it's quite surprising, I think, to us that the percentages are so consistent across courses, and now it's a matter of trying to leverage that collective talent or crowdsource it.
Anybody else want to add this concept of transparency?
Just in terms of the Harvard faculty we work with, all of them, when you go and talk to them about developing their courses, are like, well, what is XY doing? What does it look like? What is everyone else? How are they adapting to this technology and working online? So I think even for people who aren't necessarily taking MOOCs, there's a huge amount of interest in the way in which this teaching is happening.
Okay. I saw a hand go up. Did you already? Okay.
Hey, I'm Dan Grossman from the University of Washington, and I also was going to pick up on the teachers in MOOC's point. You know, certainly when I was putting together the MOOC as for the first time, I thought a lot about my colleagues who would surely be watching and being very careful in that sense, but still never imagined 6%. And just to add to your bullet list, I find it really intriguing to create a cohort of such teachers, not just for their own networking and professional development, but because I made 1,000 little decisions when I put together my MOOC, and I've never been able to explain them to anyone. And if that's what they're interested in seeing, why is he doing it this way? Why was that problem chosen? Oh, that's an interesting example. There's a new opportunity for the MOOC instructors to engage with this particular kind of participant.
Okay. Anybody? All right, I have another one. Oh, you have one? Okay. No, go ahead.
You can go first. I just wanted to follow up on that point as well. I taught a MOOC last year. There was an introduction to human evolution, and one of my goals, given the topic, was to provide educational resources for secondary teachers so that they could bring that back into the classroom. And it was fantastic to get your quantitative data, because qualitatively in the feedback we got after the course, there was lots of responses from teachers. And they said everything from they would be reincorporating lessons in genetics based on this class into their high school classroom that they had dropped because they'd kind of lost the inspiration. But I wondered if you had any thoughts for best practices when it comes to creating the kind of modular components and licensing them in the way so that high school teachers in particular are more free to incorporate them directly into their teaching in a way that would be effective.
I'd actually love our colleagues at Mass Bay to talk a little bit about that, because you guys had to customize content.
We did customize the materials so that students could really absorb the academic, I'd say, nutrition that was really there. I think one of the issues is that since they were not, the MOOC material is not open, I think it would have been nice to actually be able to add Hal Rigg's interactive resources into that course for the students. And it raises another kind of issue, I think, is what goes on with teachers, is that especially K-12 teachers and middle and teachers, faculty at community colleges, we meet people where they are. And so there's actually a lot of experience around the kind of research questions that were raised by Susan Singer this morning. And I guess I put out a plea for that. We would really like people who want to do research to work with us. I mean, it really should be a two-way street, because there's a lot of experience. We teach 7 courses, 5-7 courses, so obviously there's not a lot of time to write papers or anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, Davison, did you have?
Yeah, there's a second edX project going on at Davidson College that we're not directly involved in, but Daniel will be very soon. And this is building modules for AP courses for high school teachers. And I think the thing that will make this one very successful is the inclusion of high school teachers in the design of this for blended learning. So we won't just be providing the modules online, we'll be providing the scaffolding to help them integrate activities that happen in class.
I don't remember the author, but there was a recent paper, I think it's the Center for Educational Policy, where they listed a number of key issues facing teacher professional development. And one of those was around sort of resources and their implementation, right? And so there's a big issue right now that there's a one-day workshop where they say, here's great learning activities and here's some resources, but then they leave, right? And so these teachers are by themselves to try to do this on their own. And so one part of having teacher networks, for example, is that they can sort of facilitate each other, right, and help each other along the way as you begin trying to implement those resources. So that's just a point to make too. The resources by themselves won't fully cut it.
You had.
Hi, I'm Chinmay from Stanford. This is a question especially for Professor Cooperman, who you talked about you don't know a poem, you experience it uniquely. And you said about you don't know a poem, but you experience it uniquely. And that really was, I think I'm trying to understand that completely. And by that, do you mean that we have erred in sort of emphasizing assessment online, and whether we should be emphasizing something else, maybe collaboration? And if in an ideal world, if we could change everything about online education, what is it that you would want us to emphasize most in these online learning platforms?
It's a long conversation, but let me see if I can just say something very brief. I think all of us have gotten enthused, me too, by the possibility of big data, by the possibility of getting people involved and so forth and so on. And we tend to focus a tremendous amount on the actual attention. I mean, they now can study the big data from these courses to see how often people sign off, sign on. I mean, we can know so much more about how people consume this material. That's fine. I have yet to hear about a MOOC. Well, the problem was the level of the material and how we're deciding to shape it, or how we understand philosophy. These courses are largely academic light, and the form that we're using in order to address what we perceive as the student need, there's no doubt it's a good idea. You should address the students, but you're making a choice when you do that, and you're never teaching the students to go beyond the 8-minute attention span, or the 3-minute attention span, or the 15-minute attention span. We're not giving them material to read outside of class, because that's not how MOOCs work. So my suggestion is that we should be looking at these things, at least in part, the way we used to look at courses. That professor is a brilliant person, and I don't always understand more than 20% of what he says, but it's worth thinking about what she said and going into it and working at it. And we can say, yeah, but the kids won't do it. Well, maybe we have to figure out some way to do that too. So
Thank you.
I'm happy to talk.
Okay, we have one in the back.
I'm Ursula Wolls, and I have a little startup, but I've been a computer science educator for, I think it's 36 years. I taught my first programming class here at MIT to Logo students. And I spend a lot of time in the computer science education community. I want to assure you that learning how to program also requires having a very, very individual experience with coding and with language. And so if we can't do poetry in the way that us old farts want to teach, and we can't do computer science the way us old farts want to teach, then my question to all of you is, what should we be teaching with the MOOCs? And I'm just being as controversial as you are. I love the technology. I think it's really cool. I'm building the technology. But I think we are missing the point to some degree, that it's about what is this course or this module or this fragment or this Khan Academy video doing for this individual student so that they can have a real genuine experience with the material. What's in the middle?
I'll answer sort of the other, they say, how does a Jew scratch his ear? I always look for the other way around it. One of the biggest problems we had in the MOOC I taught was peer evaluation, because the students get mad at each other and they don't understand each other and things like that. It's in a classroom, you can kind of control for that. You can encourage them to be individual, and if they get out of hand, you can swap them and say, don't talk that way. It's much harder to do it in this thing, and indeed, yet I think we should be building in ways to accommodate it, and it is dangerous. It's very difficult, but we have to find some way.
Cassandra, what about, I was going to say, the design part that she was asking about, who were these for? You guys are having some different experiences. Why don't you share a little bit?
Well, I'm not sure quite what you're getting at, but I can say that I think it's hard to answer that question in part because there are so many, very many different motivations and audiences in mind for MOOCs. And at Caltech, most of our faculty who have taught these courses have been very insistent that they remain as rigorous and as kind of assuming of prior quantitative content knowledge as our courses on campus have. Now, that's a very particular choice for our institution, and it has a lot of implications as well. So I think it's tough to answer the question, but another thing that we've also seen is that we're not always segmenting our lectures down into 8 minutes. Some of ours are much longer. At the same time, the flip side of that is some of our courses have really re-understood the structure of the very advanced material that they are teaching by having to face the challenge of thinking in terms of concepts and the right amount of time and the right sort of sustained attention and student work on a particular area.
One of the interesting things from hearing everybody's comments is it's very clear that we really don't have any common understanding of what a MOOC is. And it seems I sort of go back to the old parable. It's like, people are arguing that, it's a snake, no, it's a tree trunk, and it's an elephant. And every single one of you, all of us, we're all taking our own spin on what we understand and what we want it to be on our campus. Is it a university course? Is it an AP course? Is it a learning community? Is it for faculty development? Is it, so I guess my question would be is how are you perceiving it on campus? Because I think that one of the things that all of us are trying to do is figure out how this is going to impact what we're doing on our campuses. And each university seems to be taking a different sort of take on that. So that's sort of my question to all of you is what is it to you?
I guess what is it for us at a community college is to provide open access and an education for students. And so I see the MOOCs as hopefully being a way to reach a wider range of students who can't come to campus or those things. That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay. Without wanting to talk too much, just let me mention one other thing. MOOCs are, to some extent, the scariest thing campuses have seen in a generation. University of Maryland has encouraged MOOCs in no small measure because Penn State has online learning and MOOCs, and that allows Penn State to steal our students because they can't offer a degree in Maryland, but they can offer MOOCs. And that's going on everywhere. There's no doubt that edX was in part a reaction to the frightening fact of the rise of this kind of new free education. And the Ivies were very worried about what is that going to mean to their monopoly. So that's another thing that these mean is a new alternative model. Hasn't proven to be a viable one yet, but it may be.
Hi, for us at Davidson, I've thought about it as sort of an R&D arm for teaching and learning. So it's a way of building teams around building learning experiences, which is not the way that I think learning experiences are typically constructed. They're typically constructed by one faculty member in front of a group of students who give them feedback at the end of the course. And instead, this is an opportunity for a team of people to develop a learning experience and then get feedback from potentially thousands and thousands of people across the world, and to learn very quickly what's working and what's not, and hopefully build in some of those lessons into what we do at Davidson. So our first professor ever to teach a MOOC at Davidson, Dr. Erland Stevens, he actually said in his application to teach a MOOC, he said, I want to do this because I've taught my course the same way for 10 years, and I don't really want to change it because I think it works pretty well. But I want to be able to experiment with some new ideas that I have. And so he built this MOOC and he taught it, and now that's the case study I referenced in my brief talk. It's totally transformed the way he thinks about teaching in his own class, and he's using it to flip his classroom and involve his students as co-authors in course material and as TAs. So we're only at the very beginning of it when we've been doing this for less than a year at Davidson, but already it's really triggered some creative and out-of-the-box thinking about what teaching and learning can look like and how these tools can enable things that we previously weren't able to do or weren't even considering.
I just wanted to remark that it's so easy to forget how much heterogeneity there already is in teaching and academia, we should celebrate and treat as a blessing the wide variety of things that go on, even in the same classroom on the same campus in a given day, because it's different disciplines, or it's people from different generations, or it's simply different styles. And let's not overgeneralize, and let's hope that in MOOCs going forward, we have the same variety. Let's hope that some MOOCs ask you to study a 10-line poem for 90 minutes. And other MOOCs are perfectly happy to have you watch 2-minute videos on your bus every morning, right? This can be okay. And I think it's just important that we set expectations for our students, just like we always do. And I think that the participants in MOOCs actually are not necessarily getting this message, because each MOOC kind of looks the same, and we've all said 8 minutes, and we've all tried to do whatever. And I think we should do more to say, okay, you signed up for this thing. Here's a half-hour description of what it's going to be like. And it's not going to be like your other MOOCs. This is special. This is how it's different. And we can have a lot of variety. We don't have to figure out the way to do a MOOC.
Go ahead.
It's faster just to run and get it. I love that we're getting back to the idea of transparency. So as we think about building more transparent kind of communities within MOOCs, which I think is this very powerful idea that we've all had, thinking about the teachers who are in the MOOCs. That's really the same idea as having our students in our classes on campus, becoming more metacognitively aware, understanding their own process of learning. So we're really talking about expanding that outward to a larger group as well. So thank you.
I'm Anne from Novo, and I started at Coursera in 2012, and I've probably worked with, 30 or 50 professors at various institutions, including Dan Grossman. And one thing that I've noticed very broadly is that the application of classroom technology, traditional classroom technology, to these new technologies is a flip to student-centered instruction. And that's really been across the board, that most professors at these institutions are hired because of their content knowledge and their content expertise. And this really forces them, when they go wide, like we would say in the movie business, when you open really big, you have to think about what the audience is thinking. And so suddenly, even, the first MOOCs we delivered very broadcast style, you were getting all this feedback. And so I think it's just tremendous, everything that everyone is doing, because we're listening to students who are not even our students, who haven't been screened, by admissions offices, and they're telling us what we think. And so I just wanted to thank all of you for doing such great work, because I think it's really can be transformative in how we proceed.
So I think the other thing that's surfacing here is this notion of how much team we need in order to do a MOOC. And I think that also impacts the transparency. Did some of you want to talk a little bit about how that impacted your teaching, or how it impacted your MOOC, looking at the team approach in terms of design?
Team, you mean the group that produces it, or a group of teachers?
The group that produces it.
Well, in my case, I think one of the things that probably many of you have run into, our university gave us X amount of money. That amount of money we could use any way we wanted. I used it in part to pay an experienced videographer who had the ability to edit, to take good photo with 2 cameras and edit them together and things like that. And then I bought the programming to edit that material and so forth and so on. I'm a novice when it comes to this stuff, but I spent that money. But I assure you, I spent about 3 times what the university gave me to do it. So these are expensive things, and the team, universities, if they really want to sponsor MOOCs, have to do a lot more in terms of providing the services and building the team. It's not easy to do well.
David, did you want to add something? You haven't really.
At Georgia Tech, we have a Coursera support team, and we work with the instructor. There is a platform specialist, somebody who knows about time management and scheduling, and I help with the instructional design and set up the research support. So that type of support for an instructor is also very important. Whereas videos are being produced, there's somebody there helping to critique that. There's an engineering staff there as well who quite competent at capturing videos and with excellent quality. But I think knowing that there's usually one instructor who is creating the MOOC, putting the content together, but the Coursera support team helped. For instance, how do you chunk content? That became a critical issue for many of the instructors, and without an instructional design supporter, I mean, it would be very difficult to reduce content down to an 8-minute video. So I think that essence of team is also very important, not just the instructional team, but the support team for the instructors to make some really usable, viable, and robust MOOCs.
Davidson, do you want to? You guys also used a.
One of the side effects to the team approach that we had at Davidson, I'm an instructional technologist, so the majority of the work that I do tends to be on the fringes or is an ad hoc here and there within a course. I'm working on a project I'm in and then I'm out. In this case, everyone on our team who was involved in the creation of the MOOC was equally invested as the instructor from start to finish. So we got to see the entire curriculum process from beginning to end, including all the outcomes, in a way that we hadn't done before, and that has been beneficial to our support of residential courses as well. So it's been tremendously helpful.
Yeah.
So part of what HarvardX attempts to do is provide the team for the faculty that they need, because they need so many resources and so much time dedicated to this project. And in the initial phases, HarvardX thought that a grad student would be the project lead helping the faculty, and then we realized that grad students have other priorities, and so now we provide a project lead for it who coordinates graduate students and the faculty and video production resources. But also we serve as sort of a convening place for the teaching and learning resources on campus to help faculty rethink their approach, often because they've been teaching for 10 years, and not that it's ineffective, but that they're just excited about the opportunity of reformulating this approach.
I think one of the opportunities that we have before us is to blow a course apart and put it back together again. And I think the technologies that we're talking about make it easier to do that, and in a more tangible and visible way to do that. And we hear a lot about the local teams working, instructional design teams working institution by institution. Perhaps one of the next frontiers will be opening the team approach up into more of an open source inspired model where you have cross-institutional or even larger groups of people working on, let's say, a psychology course. What is a psychology course supposed to be? Some of the larger questions, and I'll stop there.
I'm wondering, obviously we didn't develop it, but we were very impressed by the edX team when we were planning for running the course in the spring. I see this, as Lynn was saying, as an opportunity to rethink a number of things. And their outcomes that I guess institutions talk about, which is that they want to bring in underrepresented communities, et cetera. Maybe some of those folks should be on those planning teams as well.
Right, absolutely.
Another facet of teams that we might consider are those who are going into the future profession of teaching, either at the university level or in the K through 12 environment. One of the reasons perhaps that the STEM fields, at least our fields, are not adopting evidence-based teaching strategies as quickly as they might is that their mentors are less knowledgeable about those forms of teaching. So if we have an opportunity to give experience to some of our up-and-coming colleagues, I think that's one that we should not waste.
Dan?
So just as a brief counterpoint to the staff support team, the 5 MOOCs out of my department, including my own, essentially rolled with no such staff support. Faculty, undergraduate, TA staff, a little bit of IT support, and we made it up as we went along. It's a little extra work for the faculty. In some ways, the students have to learn how to do their own video editing, but it can be done.
We have one over here.
Doug Fisher, Vanderbilt University. Kathy Casserly made a comment this morning, or in her talk, that she thought that it was not important you create your own content. Your own content will not always be better than the other person's. And I don't think for lifelong teachers that is the primary motivation. I think the primary motivation is to get the excitement that some of the people that have created MOOCs get when they do put their own courses online. I think that's the primary motivation. And I think we have to tell teachers that it's just as exciting to use somebody else's content and flip your classes. That's the way I sort of got excited about teaching after 25 years of using PowerPoint.
Now everybody wants to talk. We've got one over here, one over here, one over there. Go ahead.
Mine's not a follow-up, but I
It's,
just...
okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
So there was a sort of builds a little bit on Doug's point, but also you made the comment about evidence-based practice. I'm curious, are any of you using the data that's being generated by your implementations of your courses to target where the courses need to be improved, how they need to be improved, and sort of starting that continuous cycle of data-driven continuous improvement?
So I can respond to that. The course that I spoke about in here, the Circuits and Electronics course, is now in its 5th revision. And each time the course is offered, surveys are administered. In fact, after each module, a survey is administered. And the students are asked, to what extent was the video difficult? Was it difficult? Was it easy? And perhaps, did the video help you learn the course material? So we get information like that from the students, and we take that information and then we refine the course. Also, we're looking at course assessments, the embedded assessments in the videos, module assessments, et cetera. So all of this is playing into refining the course.
Anybody? Yeah, Dan.
So my current role at MIT is a data analyst. And so essentially, all the MITx data comes through institutional research where I work, and I curate and do analytics on the data. And I'd say that I think largely there's still there's a big gap between course staff and our analysis. So I've tried to push more in the direction of course-specific issues, where there's just a number of times that people access content. Anything that I talk to, I see SAFE in the back, and I always pick on them during talks. But so SAFE is one of those examples. They have a lot of assessment in their courses, but they never get information back about who does what. And so that's still something that's very lacking, I think, at MIT. Hopefully I won't get in trouble for that, but there's still a big gap.
Anybody else?
Just one small comment. I think for me, I think on the front end of developing these courses, there's so much is going through your mind, and there's so much I don't understand about what we're building. I think you have to set up specific goals and hypotheses right from the beginning in order to do that well. And I think for the average institution, we're not thinking that way, and we don't oftentimes have the capacity or expertise to do that. And so I think actually that's a huge opportunity for collaboration among institutions, because Little Davidson College won't necessarily have the teams we need in the long run to develop these hypotheses and experiments in a really rigorous way. So that's one area. I'd love to work with any of you on that.
You had, yeah.
It may be a slight rephrasing of what Cannon said, but I see there's a scale or there are orders of magnitude of students, and what you can do with 100 students is different from what you can do with 1,000 students. And I'm curious as to how have you used the feedback that you've gotten from these students in different ways? I have a hunch that maybe HowardX uses the feedback or gathers the feedback differently than, say, if I were running a MOOC which had fewer students. So if any of you could say how you've used feedback that you've gotten from students. I don't think of it as data. I just think of it as what are your students saying and how are you using that?
The Circuits and Electronics course started out using the MOOC to deliver the content. This was last summer. And what was really fascinating about this, we used a flipped approach. The students viewed the videos online, and then they came to class, they worked on problems, and then they also did some experimentation hands-on in the classroom, in dyads. focus group revealed that the students did not like the flipped approach. They felt disconnected from what they were watching in the videos and what was happening in class. As we moved to a blended approach, those complaints dissipated. The students began to see what they were doing in class was helpful, and what they were learning outside of class was also helpful. And these two, what were disparate at first, were now united in the classroom with that 10-minute lecture. And that's the blended approach. That's how we operationally define it.
I was just going to add something that people in this room who are younger than I, and I think probably most of you are, might have a stronger reaction to this. It seems to me that one of the implications of the modern way that we consume knowledge, and it has to do with the internet and Google, and it has to do with Facebook, is that the authority structures that used to exist have disappeared. So you used to come to the university, you were a farm child, you came to the university, the professor there knew everything, and you only knew your cows, and so forth and so on, and that's gone. To some extent, the feedback is so varied from the vast number of people who take your course that it forces even people as old as I am to realize that the authority or what they think they're teaching has very little to do with what those people are accepting or internalizing. And so I think one of the results is to liberate the professor and to begin to look to inspire the students individually by throwing out problems rather than by telling them what to think.
We'll just do one more and then we're going to wrap up.
Okay. One other quick piece of your comment was about scale in a MOOC. What can we do when we have thousands and thousands of people studying and working on something together that we can't do when we have 10 or 20 or 50 or 100? And I think that's a fantastic horizon goal. We're doing citizen science with distributed networks of people producing new knowledge. One of our dreams is to run simulations with thousands of students in a class that wouldn't be significant or possible with just our students on campus. So I think that's a great direction to think about going.
Can you join me in thanking our panelists? Go out to the buses, Candace says.